Hello there friends and welcome. For today's Warhammer Rogue Trader guide we have all about character creation. And trust me, the choices you pick here are actually very important because you cannot respec out of anything here at all. Currently, whatever you pick here, well, you'll be stuck with it for the entire game, including your archetype and also your stat selection. Because when you respec the main character, it's only starting from the second level onwards. And stuff like Homeworld and Origin is not just for flavor text in dialogue, but they all provide you with unique talents and abilities that your character cannot get otherwise. So without further ado, let us get into our character creation guide. And I want to first start with archetypes, the so-called classes of the game, because I think that's what most people are here for. Later we also go for the stats, but of course afterwards I'll also cover Homeworld and Origin, as like I said before, there's a lot of unique stuff you can get here. I think it's best if I keep it to the basic ones now, but I'll also give you some tips for the advanced ones. Warrior, of course, is the must-have if you want to play any sort of melee character. It has many abilities that provide you with both more damage and also more defenses. Starting with charge, that lets you charge, deal damage, and still retain the ability to attack. Meanwhile, endure, your first unique power, is extremely powerful because it provides you with a very nice amount of both damage deflection for less damage taken and even temporary hit points at the same time. Your heroic action is all about spamming your attacks on as many enemies as possible, because eventually we even get the ability to boost this, so that whenever you kill an enemy you get more movement points, so you just slice and dice and dash through the whole battlefield. It's really that fun. And as far as your unique talents, as I said, it's mostly about more damage or more defenses when it comes to melee. Thick Skin, for example, grants you even more damage deflection and higher parry chance. Clench Thief provides you with even better damage deflection bonuses, remember they stack. While Defensive Stance provides you with huge bonuses to armor so long as you have not attacked yet. Great for the first round of battle if you roll low on initiative, as you won't then have the time to activate powerful abilities like Endure before enemies attack you. And it even works if you use Charge, which of course damages the enemy and moves you closer to them. Now, as far as more damage boosts instead of extra defenses, I would focus into the talents that increase your charge ability even further, such as Ramming Speed for a higher charge movement potential, so you hit enemies from even far away. Impetus for higher charge damage if you use it from 5 or more cells, which of course has synergy with the talent we just covered. And Rigorous Training so that you still retain the ability to move after charging, while even gaining bonuses to dodge. Better for the agility tanks. For the first ability upgrade you get, be sure to pick Sworn Enemy. It's really that good, you can spam it every round against a new target, and it provides you with a lot of powerful bonuses against a single enemy. Really useful for the tough enemies, especially bosses. While later you can pick Taunting Scream to force enemies to attack you. Now, before getting into the next archetype, this is pretty important. Whenever you level your character, you'll notice that, well, you can't really pick everything on every single level, right? Your archetype will also have a different progression of abilities, but some stay the same for all classes. For example, you start level 1 with your main ability, at level 3 you'll get another one, you'll always have it. At level 4 your heroic action, the same for all classes, well, it's a different one, but it's always gained at level 4. What this means is, at certain thresholds you'll only get to increase a different parameter. For example, level 2 warrior, most classes really is just extra skill points. Level 4, however, is when you start getting access to talents, and this is also very important. During some levels you'll get to select not only your archetype exclusive talents, for example, Desolation and Thick Skin, the ones that appear at the top here, but also the generic, universal talents, which are the ones that start from both Weapon Expert and below. On other levels, however, you'll only get to select common talents, but during these levels you can also pick your Origin or Homeworld talents. What this means is, ideally for the levels you get to select both, you'll want to focus on the class unique talents first, because you'll always have levels where you can only increase the normal talents anyways, so if you want to pick one, leave it for these levels in particular. Now let us cover the most busted of them all, and my definite favorite, Officer. I've already explained this a bit in my previous guide about the best beginner tips, but to put it simply, Officer is the main archetype for buffing allies, increasing their potential to the max, through let's say your main voice of command ability, which can highly increase all of your ally stats equal to your fellowship bonus, with modifiers. With this you can even get higher to 20 to all ally stats, and of course your most unique ability of them all, Bring It Down. Well, let's just say it only lets you grant more turns to allies. And I don't think I need to explain how powerful granting extra turns can be, especially because depending on your ally's abilities, like let's say Argenta, she can attack multiple times with these extra turns, even if they come with less action points. And the more officers you have, well, the more extra turns you can provide, culminating in their unique heroic action, Finest Hour, also my favorite, which provides an ally with a full extra turn, during which their attacks have no limit at all, so they can attack, well, pretty much equal to as many action points as they have. And by the way, if an ally uses an ability that has a cooldown before, and you activate Bring It Down to grant them an extra turn, the cooldown will have been refreshed. Well, so long as it's one turn, of course. Anyways, your talents are mostly all about buffing allies even further, especially Focus, because you not only get the bonuses from Voice of Command, but also increases your allies' perception and ballistic skill even further. Absolutely amazing for stacking critical hits chance. This is how you get 100% critical even early in the game. Personal Oversight to increase allies' resolve even further, which of course means more heroic actions. More than possible, so that Bring It Down gives even more AP to allies as an extra turn. Just be careful with the willpower bonus direct damage if they end that turn with 0 AP, which on unfair can be a bit tricky early on because, well, chances are your ally will get injured, depending on how many times you spam this. Most importantly, the Seize the Initiative feat. Let me tell you, this is simply the most overpowered of all of the early archetype feats. There's just no comparison whatsoever. All of your officers that have this feat will get an extra turn at the beginning of combat, regardless if you rolled low or high on initiative, and you even retain the turn you would get afterwards anyway, like the normal turn from initiative. Being able to act first before all enemies is just busted, because remember, you can use this extra turn to cast Bring It Down on an ally, so that they also have an extra turn, and can start deleting enemies if you use it on, let's say, your main DPS. The only limitation is that this extra turn for the officer, well, they'll only have 2 action points, but guess what? It's the exact necessary points to use Bring It Down or buff your allies with Voice of Command, and later the super powerful Air of Authority for even higher momentum generation. So essentially, it's just super good. As a matter of fact, their heroic action is so busted that eventually you can even upgrade it so that whenever your ally kills an enemy during the extra turn, it will restore 1 action points, which means for weapons that only cost 1 AP to attack, including sniper rifles, well, you can just keep on firing again and again and again. That's how you kill everything before the enemies can react. Trust me, having officers with Seize the Initiative, it's almost like reducing the difficulty from unfair to normal. And yes, the more officers you have, the better. Now let us cover the Operative archetype. It's actually amazing for both increasing your character's damage against enemies, but also supporting allies and debuffing enemies. For starters, their main feature is called Analyze Enemies. At the start of each of your turns, you will automatically inflict 1 stack of the exploit effect on all enemies within your line of sight. If you hit an enemy affected by an exploit, you'll deal extra damage to them, which is further enhanced the more exploits the enemies have, because like I said, Analyze Enemies procs per turn, and you also have other abilities that stack exploits on top of the enemies. However, by attacking just once, the enemy will have all of their exploits removed. This can be combined with their second unique ability called Expose Weakness, which highly reduces the dodge, parry and armor of enemies the more exploits they have. It is one of the best tools against bosses, especially on unfair, because of course it will enhance the damage of all your party members plus their 2-hit chance. Their heroic action, however, well, I don't think it's that good. Not as much as Officer and Warrior. And as far as their talents, well, it's mostly about more exploit generation, more damage against enemies with exploits, or debuffing enemies further. Fresh Target, for example, increases the damage dealt against enemies with full hit points, great for snipers. Uncanny Sight, on the other hand, lets you automatically apply exploits even if you don't have enemies in your line of sight. Amazing, because, well, you're always hitting every single enemy per turn. Covert Protocol will increase your cover bonuses. As a matter of fact, you do have more talents that boost your perception and also your ballistic skills than melee ones, so I think it's a much better archetype for a ranged character, but also spellcasters, because the damage bonus from exploits and the associated talents is one of the few ways of increasing spell damage even early. Lastly, you should absolutely rush for the Joint Analysis power, because it lets your allies also remove exploits for extra damage and even enhances their damage equal to your intelligence bonus. Overall, it's a very solid, very versatile archetype. Lastly, we have Soldier, which is, well, the most important one for ranged characters, including sharpshooters, snipers, burst weapon users and all that. Your unique run and gun ability not only refreshes movement even after you attacked, but also lets you attack one more time, with less action points cost, but will give you a penalty to ballistic skills. However, through the Reveling Slaughter ability, depending on how many enemies you kill, you get to refresh your run and gun uses and remove the penalty, with a lot of other nice benefits like more ballistic skill which stacks per use, and also higher critical damage and even higher critical chance. The Firearm Mastery heroic action, well, it can be good because it's versatile enough for both snipers and burst weapon users, but once again I'd rather just use the Officer for more turns. As far as your talents, you have a lot of good stuff here that I'll cover in depth in my main Argenta build. But honestly, you should absolutely rush for Camaraderie. You can get absolutely amazing, absurd extra bonuses to damage from this alone, even higher than 100%, even early in the game. So long as you have allies nearby, which is easy for a party with many officers, many ranged characters, so long as your party is not mostly melee, you can always keep characters close together. Besides that, Swift Slaughter is also absolutely amazing, because the less enemies you have to kill to activate Revel in Slaughter, the better. Unpredictable can be great as well for loads of extra critical hit chance bonuses, which of course stack with what you get from Revel in Slaughter addictively, while Fired Up can highly increase your critical damage the more times you hit the enemy. It might not seem like much, but remember, you can spam a lot of attacks with, for example, an officer supporting you. And soldiers have a super easy time getting 100% critical chance. Rapid Reload is another powerful choice, because sniper rifles, for example, only have 10 ammo by default. You'll go through that very fast, depending on how many officers you have, granting extra turns to Argenta. And well, reloading by default is very costly, -3 AP. With this, the first reloading combat will cost 0, and the other ones just 1 AP, much easier. And I strongly recommend you pick the dash ability as early as possible, because it's one of the few ways of getting extra movement on every single turn, even after you attack. You can even use this to run away from enemies by avoiding obstacles without getting hit with attacks of opportunity. Because of the way line of sight works in this game, for a ranged sharpshooter sniper it always helps to be able to move, so that you can of course hit more enemies. Now, as far as the advanced archetypes, I'll try to keep it simple, but each of the main archetypes has a different selection, right? So you cannot pick everything. For Warrior we have Vanguard, which is the best one for tanking, Assassin, one of the best for extra damage, or Arch-Militant, which is for characters that want to combine both melee and ranged attacks on the same build. Officers, on the other hand, have Master Tactician, which is absolutely amazing for buffing allies even further, especially through the Inspire ability for extra damage. And guess what? Even more extra turns through the In the Hero's Footstep talent, the more heroic actions your party is using, which is of course super easy to generate with officers, and their abilities that further increase resolve and momentum gains. You also have Grand Strategies, just like Operative, which is well also about buffing allies and debuffing enemies through their unique combat strategy zones. You have frontline, backline, and rear. You can create the 3 of them at the very first turn of battle. They cost 0 AP, and each provide different bonuses or penalties to both allies and enemies. Always bonuses for allies, always penalties for enemies. Kill Zone Stratagem, for example, is absolutely busted in that it makes killing enemies even easier by empowering any of your combat zones with an ability that makes enemies automatically die, so long as they suffer damage and are left with less than, well, this amount here of hit points. Most importantly, just by virtue of being a Grand Strategist, your character will always act first in battle before the enemies, and well, I don't think I need to explain how powerful this is. Lastly, we have Bounty Hunter for Soldier, also Operative, which is, well, one of the best for extra damage, just like Assassin, except this can even enhance your critical hit chance and damage even further through the Hunt Down the Prey ability, which provides different bonuses depending on the difficulty tier of the enemy you kill. After applying this, it costs 0 AP only, and you have 3 stacks by default, so you can hit 3 enemies with it. And some very powerful talents, especially Heightened Concentration. Whenever you score a critical hit, you'll get a huge stacking bonus to armor penetration equal to your perception bonus, which can easily be what? Plus 10 at the time you get this, so whenever you get a critical, and guess what, you have a 100% chance, you reduce the armor of all enemies because the buff is applied to your armor penetration by 10%. Stacking. What this means is, no matter if you are on unfair against enemies with 90% plus armor, eventually you just melt everything away. Meanwhile, the Reclaim the Bounty ability is rather unique because it lets you attack even another time on the same turn. So you have a normal attack, one from Claim the Bounty, and well, if you are, let's say, a soldier like Argenta, yet another one from Run and Gun. The Exemplar archetype, on the other hand, well, every single character gets access to it eventually, starting from level 36, and it's the most versatile of them all, right? Because you can essentially just pick the best abilities of the previous archetypes you picked before, even new stuff. But to put it simply, by the time you get this, your character will already be super overpowered, so it's only icing on the cake. Well, we still have one more thing to cover, at long last, our stats. Weapon skill, of course, is the main one for melee characters. It increases your parry and reduces the enemy parry and dodge chances against melee attacks. Do note that if you attack an enemy that has a gun weapon, you will always hit them at melee, no matter how low your weapon skill is. This is mostly for other melee enemies, plus higher critical chance. As far as ballistic skill, well, it's all about ranged attacks instead, except I do think it's more important than weapon skill because by directly increasing your 2-hit chance with ranged weapons, you also get way more critical hit chance. And you have a lot of extra support to this through, for example, the Officer, Focus talent, and the Soldier Reveling Slaughter ability. Plus, unlike for melee, there's no guaranteed hit chances, right? Melee at the very least can always hit enemy gunners 100% of the time. Sadly, both your weapon skill and ballistic skill will not increase any of the actual skills in the game. Now let's cover strength. It only increases athletics, but there are loads of athletics checks to move around the map and find secrets. Sadly, the effect is rather poor. For each bonus point, you'll deal 1 additional damage. Notice that bonus is, once again, the ability score divided by 10, right? So it's not 1 for 1. Now that I have 40, I would get an extra point of damage, a single one that is, over just 30. Overall, because melee characters usually want either toughness for higher tanking with armor and hit points, or agility, both even for higher dodge tanking, I think strength is kinda left in the dust. at least until you first increase these other abilities. And speaking about them, let's talk about toughness. It also only enhances one skill, Carouse, which can help you resist a few negative effects. It's not really used that often, I'm afraid. Anyways, it does directly increase your hit points, which is great, but most importantly for the warrior archetype, a lot of your powerful tanking abilities like Endure directly scale based on your toughness bonus, so it's a worthwhile investment for tanks. Agility is also amazing for tanking, this case for dodge tanks. It does increase your demolition skill, which is the main one for disarming traps. Plus, as always, it's quite busted, just like dexterity in Dungeons & Dragons. It also grants you higher initiative and extra dodge reduction if using melee weapons. Now let's cover intelligence. It is the most loaded stat as far as increasing the biggest amount of skills possible, all the lore skills, Medicaid, tech use, and logic. Out of these, tech use is definitely the one used the most. Tech use is mostly for unlocking chests and while dealing with all sorts of machines. There's a lot of them in the game. Intelligence is also very good for the operative archetype to generate more exploits through, for example, the analyze enemy's main ability and granting more damage to allies. For a skill monkey, it's definitely the way to go. Perception, on the other hand, is amazing for ranged characters such as sharpshooters. Ideally, when combined with agility. For ballistic skills, you can kinda increase it later because you have so many buffs that enhance it anyways. Now, perception will increase the awareness skill, which is what you have to use to, let's say, detect traps, although they can only be disarmed through demolition. But most importantly, it highly reduces the enemy's dodge chance against your attacks, especially for sharpshooters, and on unfair, enemies get a huge bonus to dodge. Now let's cover willpower. It doesn't actually increase any skill, and it is the main stat for the spellcasting psykers, as most of your psyker powers will scale based on both psi rating and also willpower bonus. Also the ultimate stat for Cassia, the navigator party member. Lastly, we have fellowship. This is the ultimate stat for officers and anyone that wants to, well, benefit from the main dialogue skills, coercion, commerce, and persuasion. Also loads of checks of these ones, especially persuasion. It's kinda like charisma in the other games, but to put it simply, unless you are an officer, you can kinda dump it as usual. While it does increase your resolve, there are a lot of other ways of doing so, especially once again through the officer class. Now that we finally know what the best archetypes and stats are, let us finally cover HOMEWORLD. First, all of the HOMEWORLDs will grant you a passive that's always in effect, and you start the game with it, also bonuses to stats and penalties to some, and then a list of available talents, but you are not granted these automatically, you have to pick them when leveling up. Only the first feature is granted for free. Each of the homeworlds is better for a different sort of playstyle and build. Let's start with Death World, one of the best for melee characters. Your survival instinct main feature can help protect your character from death when you fall below a certain hit points threshold by providing you with temporary HP. It's actually called wounds in Rogue Trader. I think it's a bit counterintuitive because when I think of wounds I think of something negative, right? But in Rogue Trader, the higher your wounds, the better. Anyways, you also get a huge bonus to both dodge and armor, while you'll have at least one temporary wound, very easy with the warrior archetype, which is also perfect for melee characters. Remember that, as I've already explained in my best beginner tips for Rogue Trader, most of the bonuses you have are additive in nature, so this extra plus 20% is huge. Anyways, as far as your stats, well, you just happen to get bonuses in all of the best stats for melee characters: strength, agility, and toughness. The penalties to fellowship and intelligence don't really matter. As far as your unique talents, they also help melee characters more, besides trusty weapons, which can also increase the critical hit chance for laser weapons, so very powerful sniper rifles. While Brutal Hunter will provide you with extra criticals, once again stacking with trusty weapons, against enemies bleeding or with less than 50% hit points. Wounded Beast increases your stats depending on how many injuries or traumas you have, rather dangerous because traumas, for example, well, they have permanent debuffs until you rest at the ship. I wouldn't bother with this. Tenacity lets you remove one crippling status ailment for free, especially good for stun. On unfair mode, for example, some enemies will throw stun grenades at you that actually stack in duration of stun rounds. With this you can avoid that outright and even gain loads of temporary hit points at the same time. While lifetime of scars will grant you less damage taken from flame, toxic and bleeding. I'd rather tenacity, trusty weapons and brutal hunter. VOIDBORN, on the other hand, is one of the most versatile of them all, but especially for spellcasters like the Psykers and also support classes like Officer. Their Fortune unique feature, well, it is actually not only one of the best of them all, but also one of the most unique. You simply get a passive that lets you reroll any failed attack, dodge, parry, stat or skill check with a 20% chance of success. Plus, enemies that dodge or parry against you also have a 20% chance to fail if they succeed. Just for skill checks, it's already amazing. Some skill checks in the game are pretty high. But essentially, because this is a passive that works on every single one of these rolls, well, it is extremely efficient and quite powerful. You have bonuses to willpower, amazing for Psykers, the spellcasters of the game, also intelligence and a penalty to strength. One of your talents is also extremely busted, Jinx. With this, whenever you have higher than 50% hit points, very easy to do, especially if you are an officer with a talent that lets you always act first before the enemy. All chances of all creatures, including enemies, in a 3-cell radius are increased by 10%. This 10% actually works for a lot of things: to hit chance, dodge, parry, even skill checks, most importantly critical hit chance. And remember, just like with the Death World bonuses, it's all additive, right? So added on top of each other. It does have a downside of reducing the checks when you're below 50% hit points, but that's almost never gonna happen if you know what you're doing. And of course, because Jinx also works for the enemies, it's much better on ranged characters. And definitely one of the easiest ways of getting your critical hit chance stack going for 100% even early game. Contagious Luck is quite good as well, as it provides a bonus similar to Fortune but to allies. Bloody Mass gives you a chance of getting double critical hit damage, but it's only a 10%. However, because of how many attacks you can get and how easy it is to stack critical hit, this can be a worthwhile investment if you have the space for it. Just a Flesh Wound, on the other hand, lets you survive with a 20% chance, even if you take lethal damage, while Be Smart is quite unique in that it lets you apply your Fellowship bonus instead of Intelligence for abilities and talents. Overall, it's a super solid archetype, just like Death World, but Fortune and Jinx are really OP. HIVE World, on the other hand, is all about being surrounded by allies for maximum bonuses. Strength in numbers grants you bonuses to Resolve, very good because Resolve is directly tied to momentum gains and also the heroic actions, with a penalty if there's no creatures around. Because it works for both allies and enemies, well, chances are you'll always have something around you. You get bonuses to Fellowship and Agility, so quite good for the Officer archetype to buff allies even further, especially because they do excel at increasing allies' resolved, based on their very own resolve, which of course is increased by strength of numbers. Camaraderie will let them make willpower resistance tests using Fellowship. Weapon personalization grants bonuses to Rate of Fire, very good for burst. Also damage, armor penetration and recoil, but it's mostly minor benefits. Outnumber increases your melee superiority bonuses, while reducing that from the enemy, and Helping Hand increases your movement by being close to allies. Fresh Start is kinda poor though, it's just a 50% bonus to dodge against the first attack of opportunity, but this is only going to happen if you move away from enemies, so rather niche. Forge World, on the other hand, is quite the versatile talent for both tanking or also having high damage. You get bonuses to Intelligence and Toughness, but can choose one of 3 unique features that each enhance something different about you. Analytics for bonus critical chance, and this is a very big bonus. Locomotion System for bonuses to both movement and dodge, perfect for agility tanks. And Subskin Armor for higher armor, perfect for the classic armored tanks instead of the agility dodge ones. They also have some unique talents. They are mostly about increasing the damage of plasma, melta or power weapon types, even bonuses to movement points when wearing heavy armor, and +1 deflection, which is amazing because it's the main source of damage reduction and always stacks, using all of the main dialogue checks, persuasion, coercion and commerce, based on intelligence instead of fellowship, bonuses to hit and dodge reduction chances, even less damage against burning and fire weapons, but that's rather situational, it's still because of them all, I'm afraid. Now let's cover Imperial World. Your main feature lets you add a +10 bonus to any stat of choice. And unlike all of the other homeworlds, you don't have a penalty to anything. With a higher starting stat bonus, of course, +10 instead of +5, but it's only for one stat. Your unique talents can be quite good as well. Stronger Together, for example, will provide all allies, besides Xenos, with a +5 to the same stat you chose from Humanity's Finest. No Heresy provides you with bonuses against demonic or Xenos creatures. Doing My Part, on the other hand, is rather unique, so long as your Imperial World character is the only one currently in party with whatever archetype you have. Let's say you are the only warrior of the party. The first use of any of your warrior abilities will cost -1 AP. Especially good because there's a lot of abilities that only cost 1 AP. While Ready to Serve can highly increase your resolve, perfect for more momentum. Better to Die for the Emperor though is pretty weak. You might have noticed all the homeworlds have one talent that's kinda disappointing, because it does require you to be at low hit points. Lastly, we have Fortress World, amazing for damage focused characters, especially ranged and also Psykers, the spellcasters. You get bonuses to Perception and Willpower, and your most unique ability is called Never Stop Shooting. Each time you kill an enemy, you'll get +10 stacks of Never Stop Shooting. At the start of your turn, you'll get a percentage chance equal to your stacks on Never Stop Shooting that the first attack this round will cost 0 AP and not count towards the attack limit. Very good. If the effect does trigger, all the stacks will be lost, but well, you can always generate more by killing enemies, and you do have a few talents that let you keep some of the stacks even after using them, such as Never Stop Believing. It also lets you constantly upgrade your willpower despite archetype limitations. Familiar Kickback to generate stacks of Never Stop Shooting at the end of your turn instead of just when killing enemies. Combat Addict can provide some minor bonuses during combat with penalties outside, not that much of an issue unless you want to make skill checks with this character. Spare Magazine makes your first reload cost 0 AP, but there is another talent for that. While Hail of Steel will highly increase your dodge against ranged attacks for every shot you make. With homeworlds out of the way, let's now cover your origins. And just like the homeworlds, each origin will provide you first with a unique feature that you cannot get otherwise, skill and stat bonuses, and once again, talents that you can only pick if you go for a certain origin. This is part of what I say, it's so important what you pick at character creation, as you can't respec out of this and you're adding more and more unique stuff on top of each other. But anyways, first we have the ASTRA MILITARUM Commander. Regimental Tactics is your unique power, which increases the damage against enemies that are adjacent to the commander or your very own allies. Most of the unique features from Origins can only be used once per combat, but they cost 0 AP to activate, so you can always use them. In keeping with the theme of Regimental Tactics, pretty much all of your unique talents only have bonuses, so long as you are either near the enemy or the enemies are near you, or your allies are surrounded by enemies and so on. I'd say this can be quite a good origin for burst fire characters, so the ones that want to use machine guns and so on. As Suppression Fire will grant bonuses to dodge, reduction, parry, reduction, even cover penetration, higher damage when close to allies, and so on. Commissar is another fun origin, because your at all costs unique power, well, there's two ways of using it. First, by attacking the enemy, so that whoever kills the marked enemy will get an additional turn with +2 AP and +4 MP. Additional turns are always amazing. But it can also buff allies, except you have to hit them, so you're shooting at your own ally to buff them first, because for the bonuses of at all costs to apply, you have to attack, right? It's your first single shot or melee attack. Note that the officer themselves cannot benefit from this. So as I said, it is about supporting allies in a way. Well, more like a tough love type of character, if you know what I mean. As far as your talents, they are mostly all about providing extra bonuses to your at all costs ability. Duty and Honor, for example, increases the damage your ally takes by a lot, but also grants them even more AP and MP for the extra turn generated by at all costs. Motivation lets you grant more movement points to allies. For the Emperor, highly increases your momentum generation. Summary Execution is very good because it's one of the few ways of actually getting more uses from at all costs instead of being limited to just once, while Show Them Contempt grants allies bonuses to resolve, so long as you are close to an enemy, kinda dangerous unless you are melee, of course. Meanwhile, Crime Lord is rather unique in that, just like our Forge Homeworld, you have an ability that can enhance different things depending on what you want. Surefire Plan. At the start of combat, you'll gain stacks of Surefire Plan equal to your intelligence bonus, and you can actually use it multiple times with different variants. If you attack afterwards, you increase your damage. If you move, you'll get more dodge and parry. Meanwhile, if you use, let's say, a debuffing ability on an enemy, they will suffer penalties to their damage. So it can be great for melee characters because you can always combine both more damage with also more dodge and parry, all in the same turn. It's no wonder that you also gain bonuses to your weapon skill. As far as your talents, Killing Plan will enhance the damage under Surefire Plan, and even restore one stack of it, very good. Because just like the Summary Execution from Commissar, because his abilities are rather limited in uses, you always want to focus on something that provides more uses of them. Disorienting Plan will further debuff enemies with penalties to dodge and parry reduction. The last plan is extremely powerful in that it prevents you from dying so long as you have one stack of Surefire Plan, at the cost of also preventing you from gaining more. Escape Plan grants you even higher dodge and parry bonuses with even more stacks of Surefire whenever you successfully dodge or parry, while Contingency Plan will always ensure you have at least one stack of Surefire Plan per turn. Overall, I do think it's one of the most solid origins, especially for melee characters, because of not only how versatile it is, but how easy it is to generate more stacks of your most important ability for more uses. Now let's cover MINISTORUM Priest, which is mostly about supporting allies. You have a Warm Hymn ability, which is very good for generating momentum, but can only be used once. Now, because a lot of the unique talents you get as a priest directly require the enemies to be under the area of effect of your War Hymn ability, it's better focused for a tank character or someone who will move close to enemies, at least if you want to use these talents, because as far as the normal War Hymn ability, you can always use it even far away just to generate more momentum. But anyways, Litany of Purification will make enemies under the area of effect become disturbed, and by the way, the enemies won't gain more momentum, right? It's just for your own party. These extra effects, however, will hamper them further. Shield of Faith provide you with quite a hefty bonus to armor based on willpower bonus against demons and warp damage, even permanently increases your own resolve. Flancing Faith can provide extra bonuses against demons and psyker enemies. Litany of Hatred can provide bonuses to damage to allies under War Hymn, but it's a very, very minor bonus, right? Because it's the bonus, which is already the total stat divided by 10, and then divided by 2. While the Emperor Protects is super unique in that it provides you a willpower bonus percentage chance of ignoring all enemy attacks. Of course, it's not going to be massive or anything like a 6 to 10% plus, but well, it helps when you're a tanking character. And by the way, one of the very first companions you get, Argenta, the Sister of Battle, is a MINISTORUM Priest. Speaking about party members, Abelard, the very first party member you get, is a Navy officer, so let's cover it now. Its most unique ability is called Brace for Impact, amazing for tanking. It's no wonder Abelard starts with it. For one round, both the character and any allies nearby will get a very nice +2 deflection bonus for each archetype taken by the character, You start with just 1, but eventually you can get 2 more, so that's 6 deflection. Damage deflection stacks and is amazing for reducing flat amounts of damage. I do find the unique talents to be rather poor, however. You have get into cover to get allies to move when you activate brace for impact. Perfect timing, however, can be good for higher cover penetration. Scatter reduces the damage from attacks of opportunity, rather poor. Get Off Me, however, lets you use ranged weapons in threatened areas, which also knocks the enemies down and pushes them away. Rather unique, because by default you are locked from using ranged attacks if the enemy is super close to you. Now let us cover the Noble Origin, one of my favorites, because of its unique synergy with the Officer archetype, one of the most busted ones. It's perfect for buffing allies even further. Your main Use Serve Me feature lets, well, you buff allies for an increase of +5 to all their stats, and bonuses to critical hit chance. You start with bonuses to dialogue skills and also fellowship, which increases them even further, the same for the main officer talents. However, as far as your talents, I do find them a bit disappointing besides you do something, which can grant allies 1 extra action point. The rest are mostly about minor buffs that I wouldn't bother spending a talent for, like extra movement. You Are Next, on the other hand, only works if you're very low in hit points, no way. Temporary wounds can be granted as well, but there's so many other sources of them, and that's pretty much it. Last but not least, we have the most unique of them all, Sanctioned PSYKER, which is of course the main spellcaster class of the game. And by the way, if you do not pick this, you will not be able to cast spells for pretty much, well, 60 to 70% of the game. So if you want to play a spellcaster, be sure to pick this right at character creation. Psykers work like this. You first have to choose a different... Well, it's kinda like a school of magic from Dungeons and Dragons, right? It's a different Psyker type, a subclass. We have Biomancer, Diviner, Pyromancer, SANCTIC, and also Telepath. Each has different spells, which are your abilities, and also different talents you can pick. However, when leveling your character up, even if you start as, let's say, a Biomancer, you can spend a power to specialize in another school, so that during the later levels, well, you'll have access to the talents and abilities of the new school you picked together with the old one. Well, there's not that many options to do so when leveling. The only downside of being a Sanctioned PSYKER is that you start with 0 Psi rating, and well, this means you'll deal pretty low damage until around level 10, which is when you can finally pick Psi rating 1. After all, you might have noticed that pretty much all of your psychic powers or spells, they scale directly based on Psi rating. And when you have 0, well, the rule is simple, any number multiplied by 0 equals 0, so you'll barely get any scaling at all. Idira, on the other hand, is a party member who is an unsanctioned PSYKER, so she starts with higher Psi rating of 1, and can usually deal much more damage to enemies. However, being a sanctioned PSYKER has a benefit. You have way lesser chances of generating psychic phenomena, which can happen whenever you cast spells, and trust me, they are 100% of the time negative effects. There's no such thing as good psychic phenomena. With Idira, for example, who is unsanctioned, she can even summon demons on top of your party members who will most likely proceed to kill you with her very first action. As a sanctioned PSYKER, you can avoid that most of the time. Anyways, let's now do a quick section on the main PSYKER schools. I'll try to keep this simple because, well, I'm planning on a full PSYKER guide where I'll cover each in depth. Biomancer is the best one if you want to play a melee PSYKER, because it's all about further boosting your very own character or allies, while also debuffing enemies. For example, your starter Iron Arm spell will grant bonuses to both strength and toughness, great for any melee character, until the end of combat too, so quite efficient. And Feeble, on the other hand, lets you increase damage taken by enemies while also debuffing their strength and agility. And you have feats that further support the fighter mage playstyle. Do note that one of the PSYKER party members, Heinrichs, is already both a Biomancer and also a SANCTIC. Speaking about party members, we also have one who is a Diviner, Idira, which you also recruit very early. Diviner is mostly about also buffing your characters. Forewarning, their main spell, provides a very nice bonus to dodge and parry. And most of their other spells, as you can see here, are also about buffing either your allies or yourself. The same for their talents such as Edge of Fate, which can provide, well, extra critical hits chance for all party members, or Unnatural Luck to prevent critical hits. Now let us cover Pyromancer, which, as one might expect, is the classic one for blaster casters, all about damage. Your main spell is Ignite, which will deal damage, but like I said, because of low psi rating, it's not that much damage, but it will cause enemies to automatically burn, which grants a damage over time effect, so can help with killing enemies early on. Besides that, you have Firestorm, which is essentially an area of effect version of Ignite, so that you can apply it on other enemies. Molten Beam, the same as Ignite, with double damage except on a huge line. And well, that's the gist of the Pyromancer PSYKER spells. Meanwhile, your unique talents are, well, all about more damage, such as Backdraft, so that your psychic power damage can also change to a nearby enemy. Melting Armor to slowly melt the enemy's armor for more damage taken. Even Relentless Blaze, which makes it so that so long as you are burning, you'll get higher psi rating. Now let us cover one of my favorite psychic archetypes, SANCTIC, which is all about buffing. As area of effect even, your main spell, Word of the Emperor, has a huge area of effect. You can easily hit your whole party members with this at once, and you increase their resolve. Amazing for the officer archetype, but most importantly for higher momentum generation by all allies. Meanwhile, both Hammer of the Emperor and Shield of the Emperor will further empower everyone that's been hit by Word of the Emperor. Shield for a huge amount of extra armor and also some deflection, Hammer for a higher damage buff, also Light of the Emperor for healing. They even have one of the most unique damaging spells in the game, Purge Soul, which has loads of extra damage modifiers depending on the enemies you fight, especially against demons, Chaos Worshippers, and also if the enemy has already damaged one ally. And if you want to go for the classic anime fighter mage, you can even create a magical sword through the Sword of Faith power. Some of their talents can be quite good too, especially Psalms of Heroes, which increases your psi rating by +1 whenever an ally uses a heroic act. And trust me, you can spam your heroic acts, well, a lot of times if you know what you're doing, especially when you are increasing the resolve of your allies. Sadly, at the very moment, at least as far as I've tested, this feat is bugged and not working, but hey, when it's fixed, it's definitely a must-have choice, because once again, the main weakness of the Sanctioned PSYKER, which all the PSYKER types you can pick are, is the fact they start with 0 psi rating. With this talent, we can easily overcome that. Sanctified Slayer, on the other hand, will increase your critical hit chance, equal to resolve, while Destined can even provide you with stacking bonuses to your armor. Lastly, we have the Telepath PSYKER. Idira is also one, right? She's both a diviner and a telepath. Telepath is pretty much the main crowd control PSYKER in the game, but they also have a few tools for damage, like their main Psychic Shriek. But like I said, it's mostly about enemy crowd control such as Dominate, most importantly Sensory Deprivation for very nasty debuffs, because the enemy will become blinded even if they make the saving throw, Mind Rupture so enemies are forced to attack allies and so on, and Psychic Assault, very good for inflicting both damage and even attempting to make enemies stunned on a huge cone in front of the PSYKER. Kinda like a very special navigator power Cassia the party member has. Their talents are mostly focused on more damage or more crowd control and debuffs, of course. Aftershock, for example, will inflict even more damage on enemies. Pain Channeling will make your spells change to a nearby target if they deal more damage than whatever the initial target has in hit points, and so on. Besides that, don't forget, any of the PSYKERs can pick the generic PSYKER talents. It's only the specific school ones that are limited to what you pick here. Now let's cover your Triumph and Darkest Hour. These are mostly minor bonuses, they don't matter that much. Triumph will increase a skill by +5, while Darkest Hour will reduce one by the same amount. These actually change depending on your origin. For example, if I go with Commissar, well, there's different ones and different bonuses and penalties. Just don't pick something that will interfere with whatever skills you want to have. For example, if I want High Coercion, one of the main dialogue skills, there's not much of a point into picking one that grants a penalty to Persuasion, another dialogue skill, both based on the same stat, Fellowship. And well, this was pretty much it from my character creation guide. I know it's a long video, but I do hope I managed to properly explain all of the best, most important choices you have, because remember, you cannot respec out of them at all. As always, if you found this guide useful, please remember to like, subscribe, and also consider becoming a channel member if you can. I truly appreciate your support. Thank you for watching and see you next time, friends, with of course character builds especially for companions like Cassia and Argenta.